Thank you. Okay, thank you for having me here. I will talk to you today about a new platform that we're building in my lab at Harvard. Given the heavily theorist audience, I'll try to skip all the technical details. I can talk privately to, I guess, Monica about lasers and stuff later. But for everybody else, what I'll try to do is to give you the motivation why we're building this and give you some ideas of what we'd like to do. Hopefully, this will inspire some discussions in these days. So I will start just giving a bit of context to see why we decided to build this platform. So you might be already familiar with this platform based on atom arrays. Of course, I'm personally very excited about the many scientific results and directions that have been explored in the last not even 10 years since its first appearance. And these results have been mainly in these three directions. So quantum simulation of many-body phases or dynamics, quantum information processing, and there are also some more recent and interesting results in the field of quantum metrology. So my feeling about the current situation is that very exciting things have already happened. And so to me, it means that things are getting even more serious. Like we would like to push the platform even more to get to regimes where we can really reach those more ambitious goals that we would like for quantum computers and quantum simulators to achieve. And so this means on one side that we need to push the technical capabilities. So we need to be able to do more. And some examples of the things that we need to do is to increase the number of qubits, improve fidelities, develop new efficient strategies for error correction, and so on. But at the same time, we also need to do this while we develop useful applications that are really tailored to the capabilities of this platform. And so there is this term that recently has been maybe overused, but this idea of co-design, I think, is really central to the way we develop this, where you start thinking about applications, and so you develop capabilities that are tailored to those applications and vice versa. So this is kind of the spirit with which we thought about the platform we are working on. So what I'll do is I will give you just a very quick recap of how atom arrays work and show you some of the most recent results. I'm not going to go into the details, but just to see kind of what is the state of the art. And then I will spend most of the time talking to you about what I think are the new exciting possibilities that this kind of dual species atom arrays can provide. Please ask questions at any time, even, I might give for granted some, experimental details, so just ask. So what is this platform of atom arrays look like? So we have individual atoms that are trapped in optical tweezers. So really we have these tightly focused laser beams that are able to trap individual atoms. So we create these two-dimensional arrays of optical tweezers. We can load atoms into them. We have initially this stochastic loading, and then we use the tweezers again to fill a subset of these traps in a deterministic way. So we pick up some of the atoms and we shuffle them around such that in the end we can create defect-free or almost defect-free arrays in a controlled manner. And so the first key ingredient of this platform is the ability to create these defect-free arrays with programmable geometry. So really, in a few minutes, you can change the programs on your experiments to arrange the atoms into different configurations, which is a very nice level of tunability that you have so that you can do different experiments with different geometries depending on the goals that you want to achieve. So this is the first aspect. At this point, we have atoms that are a few microns away from each other. They're neutral atoms, so they don't naturally interact. So the second key ingredient is we need to introduce interaction somehow, and we do this by exciting the atoms to these Rydberg states. So the idea is very simple. You just excite one of your valence electrons to a higher orbital, such that you have a strong dipole in your atom, and so you have van der Waals interactions between two atoms in the Rydberg state. And what we're going to use to generate entanglement is we're going to use this Rydberg blockade effect. So if you have two atoms that are within a certain distance of each other, they cannot be simultaneously excited to the Rydberg state because you have this energy penalty that is due to the van der Waals interactions. And so this is going to be the main ingredient that we're going to use to generate entanglement, both in quantum computing and in quantum simulation. Okay, so these are just the basics. Now let me show you like a few recent developments that show you really what this atom array platform is capable of. I would say that one of the most exciting things that happened in the last 2 or 3 years is the development of this new tool that is this reconfigurable connectivity, where you can shuffle the atoms around throughout the array during quantum operations to change the connectivity. And this is particularly useful for quantum error correction, where you want to store the information non-locally, generating these logical qubits in large entangled many-body states. So if we take, for example, like the famous surface code, we have this array of atoms that need to be initialized in a certain entangled state. And so you need to have entanglement that is spread out over the entire array. And I'm going to show you how we can use this reconfigurable connectivity to achieve this in an efficient way. So, for example, if you want to initialize the system in the right entangled state, what you can do is you have your data qubits, the black ones here in this drawing. So these are the data qubits in your surface code, and you add some extra ancilla qubits marked here in red. And here, what we did in this paper a few years ago is to use these ancilla qubits to mediate interactions between the data qubits. So the data qubits are fixed; they are not interacting directly with each other. But we do this sequence of 2 qubit gates and movements of the ancilla qubits to generate, for example, the entangled state of each stabilizer here in the toric code. So you see here, we bring the ancilla qubit next to one of the data qubits. We perform an entangling gate, then we move it next to another one, second entangling gate, and so on. And you can see this in this nice movie that kind of shows you how this is done. You see you have this sequence of entangling gates that are marked by these red circles, and then the atoms move around. The ancilla atoms are moving around between different positions to realize this, to change the connectivity throughout the circuit. One note here, this movie is very much slowed down by a factor of 1,000, so the actual time you see it up here. We realized that we were showing this and people thought that this was extremely slow. It's not. It takes about a millisecond to do this whole thing. Okay, so this is how it works. And so the idea here is that really this reconfigurable connectivity allows you to sort of rewire your chip throughout the circuit that you're applying, which is extremely convenient because it allows you to do things much more efficiently. I would say, even more convenient thing that this atom transport can allow you to do is to perform logical gates, again, in a very efficient manner. So now that we have encoded a logical qubit in one of these arrays of atoms, we need to do, if we want to perform a logical algorithm, we need to apply gates between these logical qubits. And so there are many ways you can do this. The way that we do this in the experiment is we have, for example, in this case, 2 logical qubits that are encoding in these 2 arrays of atoms. And then we move one of the 2 to interlacing with the other one. And then we apply a gate in a transversal way. So when we put the atoms, the twin atoms in each logical qubit next to each other, we can apply a CNOT gate between each pair of atoms. And this realizes a transversal CNOT gate on the 2 logical qubits. So you just do this simple move of all the atoms together, and then you apply the usual CNOT gate that you apply for 2 qubit gates, and you realize this transversal CNOT on the logical qubits. So we can see how this performs. So we can start with small logical qubits. Here, of course, you can initialize and measure the stabilizers, both Z and X, using these extra ancilla qubits. And then you can perform these transversal gates by, as I said, overlapping the 2 logical qubits. So we can increase the size of this array, so we can increase the code distance. And what we would like to see for a functioning quantum error correcting code is that the performance should improve, so the fidelity of the logical gates should improve if we increase the code distance. So that's what we did. We increased from d equals 3 to d equals 7, and we did observe that the infidelity of the preparation of a bed pair of the two logical qubits did indeed decrease as we went from 3 to 7. So just showing you a quick result, showing that this way of implementing the circuit and the fidelities that we realized for single and two qubit gates are good enough to see this key property. Okay, so there is a lot more that was done in this paper from last year. I'm really not going to show you any of those results because that's not the point of my talk. But I just want to show you what is the idea of this logical processor that we realized. We use this zoned architecture where we divide the computation area in 3 different zones. So we have an entangling zone where we shine these Rydberg lasers that excite to the Rydberg state, where we can entangle the atoms. So if we need to perform an entangling gate, we put the atoms in this central area. But then we have a storage zone up here where we put the atoms where they don't need to interact with each other. So they are either idle or we perform single qubit gates. And finally, we have a readout zone. So we move the atoms to this distant region here, and we have a localized imaging beam such that we can only read out a subset of the qubits. So this, I didn't mention this was all done in a single species rubidium atom array at Harvard in Misha Lukin's group, where I did my postdoc. And this is kind of state of the art of what has been done with these systems. I'm going to show you the last movie just because these are really nice to see. And they give you, again, an idea of how this works. So here we have a bunch of logical qubits. So this is really a logical circuit. And you see these different operations where at the beginning we were initializing each logical qubits in their initial state. And now we're doing a sequence of entangling gates between the logical qubits. We're changing qubits between the storage and the entangling zone. And this, I'm not even telling you what the circuit is. We're actually initializing a GHZ state, I think, here. But this just gives you an idea of how the circuit is implemented. Okay, so in this paper, again, there was a number of things that we demonstrated, but I just want to give you an idea of the complexity of the circuits that we were able to implement. We had up to 48 logical qubits. We had a very large number of 2-qubit gates. And this is really, I would say, I think it's still the largest logical algorithm that has been implemented in any quantum platform. So this is, again, all very exciting. I would like to show you now what we would like to unlock as new possibilities using a different type of atom array platform where we combine 2 atomic species. Any questions so far? Is it all clear? Okay. So what we're trying to build in my lab is an atom array where we combine 2 atomic species. And we combine this also with a second capability that is fast atom reloading. So the idea is that you have your main atom array and you have a reservoir of atoms next to it where you can continuously pull atoms into the main array as soon as you have losses that you need to compensate for. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But what is the general idea, what we're doing? So as I said before, we are trying to push certain technical capabilities that we think are crucial to enable some interesting applications. And at the same time, we think there is this continuous circle between, understanding what are the capabilities necessary for certain applications and it's really a loop. And we're thinking in 2 different directions. So we are trying to combine the scalability that comes from this fast atom reloading with the versatility that comes from the dual species architecture, such that in the near term, we can develop resource-efficient approaches that are necessary in the near term when the platforms are still limited in terms of resources. And so the efficiency is really crucial to enable any useful application. but also thinking more in the long term, we would use the same versatility to test, compare, and optimize different strategies for both encodings and quantum architectures that will really build toward fault-tolerant systems. So I will start by telling you why we decided to have certain features in our platform, starting from this idea of the dual species atom array. So this is not a new idea. This has been done by Hannes Bernin in his group that was originally in Chicago, is now nearby in Innsbruck, and other groups in Wuhan and Madison. The main features that come out of combining two different atomic species are the following. One is that since you have spectral separation between the two atoms, you have naturally, intrinsically, the selective control of qubit subsets. So the two atoms respond to different wavelengths for the laser controls, and so you can really tune them independently. What we did before, where we had to separate, for example, the atoms into a readout and an entanglement zone and so on, is not necessary anymore, because I can image, for example, a subset of qubits without the others being affected. And the other feature is, since you have two types of atoms, you have three types of interactions, both intra and interspecies, that are independently tunable. So you can find different combinations of Rydberg states that you can use such that you have different ratios of the different interaction strengths. And this gives you some versatility in the architectures that you can realize. And I will show you a few examples in the next few slides. So this is the first feature. We have two atomic species. The second is we decided to use specifically ytterbium and rubidium, such that we have a combination of an alkali atom, rubidium, and an alkaline-earth, ytterbium, that really have complementary features. So rubidium, if you are an AMO physicist, it's kind of your favorite atom. It's simple to use. It's been now used in many different kinds of experiments, so it's a very well-developed toolbox. In these atom array experiments, people have demonstrated fast and high fidelity 1 and 2 qubit gates. It has a large polarizability, so you can trap a lot of atoms with reasonable powers. But on the other side, you have ytterbium that has a more complex electronic structure, but this gives rise to, so it's a bit more difficult to control and manipulate, but at the same time, it gives you some interesting properties. For example, you can encode the qubit in these nuclear spin states that have a much better coherence times. You have narrow line cooling and imaging, so you can reach lower temperatures very easily. You have this clock transition that you can use, for example, to encode your qubits in metastable states. You can do erasure conversion and all sorts of things that people have explored in the last few years. And also you can trap the atoms when they're in the Rydberg state, which is something that you cannot do with rubidium, for example. You need to let them fly while they're in the Rydberg state. So the idea is really, we would like to get the best of the two worlds by putting these two together, because you can use each atom for the roles that are best suited to them. So for example, ytterbium is a very nice qubit because of the long coherence time, but it makes sense to use rubidium as an ancilla qubit because it's just much simpler to manipulate and doesn't need as good properties as the data qubits. Okay, so this is the second feature. We have two atoms. We have these two specific atoms. And then we combine this with this fast continuous reloading. This is an idea that has been now, most colleagues in experimental atom array labs are trying to implement this. It's just an obvious thing that you want to do. And the reason is you have atom losses in your atom arrays, and this is going to be a fundamental limit to scalability of these systems if you don't compensate for them. So if you lose a qubit, it's a big problem. So you need to be able to put it back in. And if you want to do this in a fast way and to allow for continuous operations of your quantum device, you want to do the following. So you want to separate the atom cooling and initialization from the quantum operations in the science array. So the way we do this is by spatially separating these two such that they can happen independently and you don't have crosstalk between the two. And then we connect these two. These are really two separate regions of the vacuum chamber, and we connect them with an optical lattice. it's a running wave optical lattice in the sense that we can load the atoms, and then by shifting the interference pattern, we can move the atoms from one region to another. And this can be done on a very fast timescale, as Monica actually demonstrated in our lab a few years ago. So we move the atoms from the mod chamber to the main chamber where we're going to have the science array, and then we need to pull them out of the lattice and put them into the science array. So the way we do it is we use a first set of tweezers to steal the atoms from the lattice. We move them out. We can do some imaging, cooling, and initialization, and then we bring them to a reservoir area right next to the science array, such that the atoms are already there. And as soon as we notice that there is a loss, we can replenish the atoms with these fresh ones. And the way we do it, we really try to do this on a fast time scale, such that we never have to wait for the atoms to arrive. As soon as the atom is missing, we want it to have a new one there that we can put in. And so the way we do it is by parallelizing some of these operations. So we have a conveyor belt scheme where we continuously load the MOT, bring the atoms over, while the quantum computing is happening in the science array. And this will achieve a few different things at the same time. As I said, the main goal was to improve scalability. So here I'm not telling you that I'm going to have 1 million qubits, but I'm telling you that I'm removing one of the main constraints, which is atom losses. The second thing is we're going to have much faster cycle times. We can have about a factor of 10 improvement. So currently cycle times are about 300 milliseconds. So we think we can go down to 20, 30 milliseconds in the near term, and potentially even further down with some changes to this architecture. And finally, you can have much deeper error correcting circuits, because every time when you do error correction, you have these ancilla qubits that you image. You need to do mid-circuit readout many times. If the imaging is lossy, then you just lose the ancilla qubits. And so at some point, your circuit depth is limited by the fact that you don't have ancilla qubits anymore. By having a reservoir, we can just replenish these ancilla qubits continuously. And so in principle, we can run very deep error correcting circuits. Okay. Yeah.
What's the time scale?
I'm gonna get to that in a second. Okay, so just to show you what the platform looks like right now. So we designed this vacuum chamber where you see the two regions that I identified before. So we have this region for the initial cooling with 3D MOT. We have two sources for ytterbium or rubidium. The atoms are sent into this 3D MOT where the initial cooling happens, and then we have this optical lattice that transports them down into the main glass cell. So the glass cell, the vacuum system was built in last fall, so just a few months ago, and we recently achieved the MOTs for both species. So here you see a nice cloud of rubidium and ytterbium atoms, and right now we're setting up really in these days this optical lattice to implement this continuous reloading. Okay, so what are the new tools that this architecture allows us to have? So the first one, I already kind of mentioned it, is that we can have this fast and low crosstalk mid-circuit readout. And this is really thanks to the fact that we have this wavelength separation. So when you image, for example, the ytterbium atoms, the rubidium atoms are not sensitive to their wavelength at all. So there is no crosstalk, and I don't need to move the atoms away as we did in the rubidium experiment, or we don't need to do even shelving, where which is something that other experiments do, where you put the atoms into some dark states to protect them from the imaging light. So this is one very cool thing that we can do. The second is we have a native way to implement multi-qubit gates. So entangling gates with n larger than 2. And this would allow us to have, in principle, faster and more efficient circuits. Just to show you how this would look like, let me again look at the example of the surface code. So again, here we have the purple atoms being the data qubits, and we have these ancilla qubits in green. In this case, green and purple correspond to two different atomic species, so they're actually different atoms. And so what we did before was, for example, if you need to initialize or measure a stabilizer, you have this sequence of 2 qubit gates. In this case, what we would like to do is to have, for example, a 5 qubit gate where the central ancilla qubit can mediate the entanglement between the 4 data qubits. And so in one shot, you can get the entanglement that you need for this stabilizer. And so what you need in this case is to have this interspecies blockade radius that looks like this. And you can implement this very simply just following the original protocol for the CZ gate that was proposed back in 2000 with a sequence of pulses on the control and ancilla qubits, the control and the target qubits. And the nice thing here is that you don't even need local control to do this, right? Because you have, again, this wavelength separation. So when I apply a Rydberg gate on the ancilla, it's just for the ancilla, and the Rydberg gate on the data qubit is just on the data qubit. But the crucial thing here is that this requires asymmetric interaction. So in this case, for example, I want strong interactions between ancilla and between control and target qubits, but I want basically zero interactions between control, and target. So that's the thing that you need to achieve to do this in an easy way. You can, if that's not the case, you can get around it. There was, for example, a proposal here by Alexei Gorshkov and other people where they did this just with a single species experiment, but the driving is just much more complex. So this is what we would like to achieve with the dual species experiment. And the other thing that we can do is you can add local light shifts on the ancilla qubits in the plaquettes where you don't want to apply an entangling gate. So basically what you would do here is you detune those atoms out of resonance of their Rydberg transition such that the interactions are effectively off on those stabilizers where you have a local light shift on. Okay. And this was an idea that was actually proposed a couple years ago in the group in South Korea with single species experiments, but it's just a little bit more complicated. With dual species, it's just much easier because the crosstalk are really limited. And here I just want to show you, we did some simulations of the pair interactions that we would get with our combination of species, so for ytterbium and rubidium, to check that we can do this 5 qubit gate reliably. And so what we wanted to see is that the interaction between control and target qubits is much stronger than the other interactions that we would like to be basically negligible. And this is indeed what we observe in this plot here on the right, without going into too much detail. So, and here I get to your question about the times that it takes to perform gates. Looking at these two tools, we can immediately see that this provides some very noticeable algorithmic speed up. So just as an example, we can look at what we looked at before, so how we prepare or measure the surface called stabilizer. And I want to compare how this looks like for the single species experiment or for this dual species experiment with atom reloading. So this is the same circuit that I showed you before for the single species experiment. And here, what is really limiting us is the fact that we always need to move the atoms between different configurations to apply this sequence of gates. Because the movement takes about 200 microseconds. Well, it depends on the parameters of the tweezers, but the time scale is for current experimental implementations is of the order of hundreds of microseconds, whereas the gates themselves take tens of nanoseconds. So this is a much longer time scale that we would really like to get rid of. And finally, since you need to move the atoms far away to do the imaging, then you have this final step where you need to move the atoms to a separate zone. And then the imaging can take from 200 microseconds to a few milliseconds, depending on how destructive you want it to be. So again, here, the reloading would play a role because if you want to keep as many atoms as possible, then you need to do this slowly. That you don't scatter too many photons, you don't have much heating, and you don't lose the atoms. If you want to go on fast time scale, then you're going to lose most of your ancilla qubits. So what happens instead in our experiment, what we expect to see, is that first of all, you can do this in one gate, so it's just one shot. You don't have any movement for either the change in connectivity or the imaging. And since we can bring in new ancillas, we can really do the imaging on very fast timescales. We can afford to lose all the atoms. Of course, then you're going to have to wait some time to bring in the new ancilla qubits that you need to replace when you lose the ones that you had initially. So here there is, of course, an interplay between the timescales of these two, right? You can decide to have longer imaging and lose less atoms, or or lose everything, but then bring in new ancillas. So you can see here that we really, just for the gate part, we remove all these long waits that are, this whole thing is order of a millisecond. Here we just have the single multi-qubit gate, so we really reduce the time by a lot. And this, the improvement that you have here on efficiency and speed is even more crucial if you don't look at like simple surface code, but you think, for example, of implementing high-dimensional codes with high-weight stabilizers. These multi-qubit gates become even more important. Okay, so another. Okay, I'm going to close soon. Another thing I wanted to mention is, again, looking at a similar configuration, what we can do is to combine coherent dynamics with engineered dissipative interactions. So for example, and this is based, there were some proposals early on, like 15 years ago, by Peter Zoller, Buchler, and so on. They were looking exactly at this idea where you have Rydberg atoms. So this was before atom arrays even were a thing. So you have two atomic species and you have coherent coupling between them. You consider one of them as your system and the other one as a bath. So the first one is where you encode your information, and then you have a tunable dissipative bath where the dissipation comes from optical pumping of the atoms in the bath. And so here, the idea is that you have this coherent coupling, and by using optical pumping, you can continuously reinitialize the atoms in the bath into a known state, which effectively removes entropy from the main system. And so these kind of ideas can be used for state preparation, cooling, or ideas like passive error correction. Something along these lines has been recently explored by the Google team in a paper where they looked at different ways of preparing certain interesting states by using this kind of strategy. And so this is one of the directions that we would like to look into. Okay, finally, and this is my last slide, something else that you can do is really to look at quantum simulation with all the versatility that you can have for Hamiltonian engineering given by this system. So the first aspect is you have multiple options, both for encoding qubits. So you have the hyperfine qubit in rubidium, you have the nuclear spin qubit. In ytterbium 173, you can also encode a qubit because you have a large nuclear spin manifold. You can use the different quantum statistics of the atoms. Ytterbium has both bosonic and fermionic isotopes. Rubidium is just a boson. So the ytterbium 173 has nuclear spin 5.5. So it's not huge, but it's more than 2. So, and the other aspect is, as I mentioned before, we have these 3 tunable interaction strengths that, again, you can play with to get into different interaction regimes. I will just mention one application that we've recently looked into, but there are many others, which is the simulation of lattice gauge theories. This is really a place where you see that you need to be able to encode different degrees of freedom. You need fermions, you need bosons, and you need to have the right kind of interactions between them. And we noticed that with this system, you can really try out different architectures. So one is based on this theory proposal from a couple years ago, where you have these 2 species that encode matter and gauge degrees of freedom, and you need to have these asymmetric interactions to realize the proper gauge constraints. So this is something we are planning to to look into. And then you can look at more exotic things. These are, I don't know if I'll ever do this, they're kind of complicated, but in principle, you can really look into some, certainly more complex, but you can have, your fermionic atoms, like in ytterbium, that map your fermionic degrees of freedom. You can have the qubit in ytterbium that maps your a bosonic field with a larger Hilbert space, and you can use these other species to mediate interactions. So there are some ideas that we're looking into, again, fairly complex. I don't know if they're actually doable experimentally, but we're interested in looking at how we can combine the different tools that we have here to really have the versatility that is needed for certain kinds of quantum simulation problems. So with this, I'll conclude. I'll just show you the team in the lab. So Bob, Haley, and Yi are the grad students in the group. Etienne is a postdoc that has been with us for a year now. Lilian and William are undergrad students, and these are people that help us build the experiment that are now gone elsewhere. But with this, I would like to thank you all.